It's not a good start. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you. A huge warm welcome from the Law Society for this evening's event celebrating 100 years of women solicitors. A huge warm welcome to those joining us from a live stream as well. We've got some local law societies tuning into these speeches, so wonderful to celebrate this with you all. It's wonderful to see so many inspiring and amazing women in the room today, and men, and to meet so many friends. It's been such a long time since we've had an event as big as this in person at the Law Society. It's been a huge honour working with the Law Society Women's Solicitors Network, planning this event, and we've been really busy trying to bring you a fantastic lineup of speeches, so we really hope you enjoy this evening's event. 2022 also marked a really important historic milestone in that it was a year where the first ever black president, Stephanie Boyce, handed over to the first Asian president, the first Muslim female president, Lubna, Shuja, who we'll hear from later today. So not only are we celebrating 100 years of women solicitors, but this historic handover from female president to female president. We really want to help mark and launch our campaign of celebrating 100 years of women solicitors by launching this event and celebrating the first 4 women who qualified as solicitors. And our plan will run all the way up until International Women's Day, so please look out for our content. Feel free to get involved, share it, and really help us celebrate. We think it really gives us a moment of pause to celebrate, to reflect, but see what further work is needed to help narrow the gaps to leadership and some of the issues that women still face in the profession today. Thank you to everybody who took part in our 100 Years Photo Montage initiative, which we put out on social media. We had submissions from women of all PQE practice areas and backgrounds, but the key message behind every nomination was that women are supporting other women and holding their doors open. A true reflection of the wonderful support that women are providing to each other in their profession. The photo montage will be released on December the 18th, celebrating the actual day that Carrie Morrison qualified into the profession. So please keep an eye out on social media for that as well. We have a celebration book. You may have noticed that at the registration desk, and we would welcome you all to record your personal hopes for the future and for the profession for the next 100 years. The book will sit in the Carrie Morrison room, which is just as you enter into the Law Society, and you're welcome to visit that whenever you want to. Moving on to our speakers for this evening now. Our influential speakers are here to speak about the profession's past, present and future, and they will discuss the challenges that women faced and continue to face today, with some encouraging statistics and some that highlight the amount of work we still need to do in this area. They will recommend how we as a profession can improve gender equality so that more progress can be made over the next 100 years. We will hear from the Eternal General Right Honourable Victoria Prentis Casey MP, Dana Denis-Smith, founder of First 100 Years and council member at the Law Society, followed by Lubna Shuja, president of the Law Society. So we look forward to hearing from them shortly as well. Now, if you'll allow me for a moment of indulgence, because I couldn't be here without talking about the wonderful Women Solicitors Network. I should really introduce myself. My name is Amandeep, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Women's Solicitors Network, which is made up of 15 amazing women from all backgrounds, from a broad spectrum of professional legal practices as well, and stages in their career. We've got Laura Barrell here, who's our chair, and we have just started a new term. Heidi Sandy was our chair, and she did a fantastic work during her time, and we'd like to thank her for her work. Moving on towards thinking about what we want to do as a network in the future. In 2022 and 23, we'll be focusing on raising awareness of the issues faced by women and highlighting real methods to implement change. Alongside this campaign, we will work on initiatives such as the Women in Law Pledge, Guidance will be shared on working in terms of hybrid working, gender pay gap reporting, mentoring and member engagement, as well as promoting our D&I framework. Looking more at our network's history, it wouldn't be right that we talk about the Women's Solicitors Network today without reflecting on the achievements on the first women we recognise that came before the Women's Solicitors Network, and they are the 1919 Club. This was established by 9 women who qualified by the end of 1923, giving women a forum to discuss and resolve difficulties facing women solicitors. They then went on to become the Association of Women Solicitors and continue to represent women's interests before becoming part of the Women Lawyers Division, though some regional groups remain. On behalf of the Women Solicitors Network, we want to thank you for your work and promise to carry the torch on for women solicitors. Just some additional thanks before I pass on to our speeches. This reception and the 100 Years of Women's Solicitors campaign would have not been possible without the hard work and contribution of the representatives from the various Law Society divisions and committees. That's LGBTQ+ Solicitors Network, the Ethnic Solicitors Network, Disabled Solicitors Network and Women Solicitors Network. So thank you all for those sometimes long, tiring calls, but we're here today. We've really shown a collaborative approach in planning this event. Thank you to some committee members, Niresha, Kirsty, Neha, Margaret, Fiona, Emma and Zakira for joining in on all the planning. Finally, a thank you to CMS who have sponsored the campaign, and hopefully we will get to do some networking afterwards as well. I'm going to pass you now on to the Attorney General, the Right Honourable Victoria Prentis, KC MP.
Thank you so much. And looking around the room, I think it's quite exciting to think that this looks quite different from how it would have done 100 years ago. So just take a moment to look around you and think for a minute how those first 4 women who were admitted would have felt, as the room would have looked and felt a very different one. It is such an honour and a pleasure to come and speak to you tonight as Attorney General. I'm very excited to have this new role. As many of you know, and I can see friends in the audience, I was an employed barrister, so I've always felt elements of understanding of the solicitor's profession. Now, clearly I wasn't trained properly and didn't do an accounts paper, so please don't think I'm presuming in any way. But it is a particular pleasure to be with you. As AG, I feel very, very strongly that it's my first duty to uphold the rule of law. My job is to give the government legal advice, and I have another job, as a supervisory job, over a large number of government lawyers, one of which I used to be, of course, for 17 years or so. And I think it's good to pause for a moment and reflect on the nature of the government legal profession. In the GLD, the part I worked in, 65% of the workforce are women. And in the senior civil service, in that branch of the profession, 60% are women. And I think let's take a moment to think about that really important work, the high quality, high pace, often very challenging, very ethically challenging sometimes, work that government lawyers do. And women are leading that work routinely. I felt very well supported as a woman in the GLD. I think I was the first woman to work part-time in litigation, and then I discovered the wonder that is job sharing. And it's very funny, I've just seen my job share partner in the audience, which, given that I left 8 years ago, gives some indication of the nature of our relationship. Job sharing was fantastic, worked very well for me, I hope worked very well for the other half, as it were, and we were able to push forward. Even when both of us were working almost full-time, we were able to manage our managerial function and our legal providing function with equal enthusiasm and vigour, and it was a model that worked brilliantly and continues to work brilliantly within the GLP. In the spirit of well, the suffrage movement, shall we call it that, I think it's important that we focus tonight on deeds, not words. So can I ask you all to close your eyes for a minute and think about a woman that inspired you? In my case, that's my maternal grandmother, who was not a lawyer, though she perhaps would have been were she born today, but she ended up being a teacher in South Wales, head of a very large comprehensive school, and she produced 9 granddaughters, all of whom are rather like me, and all of whom are linguists, and all of whom are managing their work life and their home life with some sort of ability. We muddle through, and we are very, very supportive of each other. I am sure that you all have such a woman in your lives. But the one I really want you to think about, the next woman I want you to think about, is the one that you are going to give a little push to. So let's literally close our eyes and think about who that person is. Okay, so you're allowed to open your eyes now. This is not a magic show. I am next going to give a speech at an organisation which works to get women into Parliament. It's called Women to Win. And the hashtag, or the slogan, if you like, is called Ask Her to Stand. The reason why we talk about asking her to stand all the time is because we know that women don't stand for election, don't stand to be on committees in their profession, don't go for the promotion, is because they haven't been asked. Men, for reasons which escape me, don't need to be asked, but women do. And this has been proved repeatedly by many people who look at societal behaviour. So, could you all please think about that woman that you're going to give a little push to, and could you give her a little push? And that will nearly always involve having a cup of tea. I don't know why, but it does. It seems to be an integral part of the process. And suggest that she goes for whatever it is she ought to be going for. As a group, well, please do that individually, but as a group, could we continue to work together to make sure we make progress on equal pay for equal work and all the things that our forefathers have been campaigning on over the last 100 years at least? And I'd like to close by thanking everybody in the room for the legal work that they do, and that includes the men. I am very honoured to be here and so pleased to represent in whatever way I can the brilliant work that is done by all of us that work in the justice system. So thank you for that. And I'd like to close by thanking the Law Society for putting on this brilliant event and for all that is going to be done over the next few months to mark the special contribution that women can make to our profession.
Huge thank you again to the Attorney General for joining us. I'd like to introduce you now to Dana Denis-Smith. She is the founder of First 100 Years and a council member at the Law Society. She's a tireless, anybody who knows her will know that Dana is a tireless campaigner. She's a fearless campaigner, and she has really helped to capture and celebrate the rich history of women as solicitors in the profession. Some of it is fascinating, some of it's rebellious, but it's the things we love to read about the women that helped us get to this stage. So over to you, please, Dana.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be described as a campaigner. I would say about myself that I am a storyteller. Definitely, that is what I plan to do tonight. I thought I'd take you on a little journey through our history from the very beginning. So the question that has preoccupied me and started me on this campaigning path has been, why should not women be allowed to practice as solicitors? That was a question first posed in 1891, when a country solicitor that was not a happy father because he did not have a son, he only had a daughter, he wanted to ensure his succession for his practice and came and petitioned the Law Society to allow him to train his daughter so that he could provide for her and he could continue in his practice. The answer came very quickly back. It was against the law. It couldn't be accommodated. He had to find some other way. She was being paid by his office, so that was at least a good thing, but she could not qualify. He was turned down. This was, at the time, picked up by the press. It was described as a decision that may be legally correct, but without a doubt, it is a socially unjust decision. Now, that decision stood for a further 30 years, and finally, we started to have bigger noises, helped by the case of Bebb versus the Law Society, where 4 women, and in the end only the one, took it all the way to the Court of Appeal, challenged the Law Society to redefine the idea of person, and women were not one such thing. So they had to wait some more. In 1918, after the First World War, and the women had paid their dues, and they had worked really hard in the factories, and they had shown they can put the work when it was required. There was another wave of acceptance, and yet again, women said, it's time. And the bill started going through the House of Lords. It was called the Solicitors' Qualification of Women Bill. It never passed. But it was good because it was debated, and also it gave us insight into what were the objections. Why didn't the men want the women in? An example, Lord Halsbury. He objected to the female solicitors on the ground that women can never write conciliatory letters, and their employment will lead to more litigation. Don't we just want more of that in our jurisdiction today? I say women had foresight. In any case, even the papers derided such responses. They basically said it cannot be imputed to that particular defect to women alone. They are perfectly conciliatory, and a few of them may be deficient in the art of drawing the other party, as they said, while giving little away. However, they also said, I hardly think we shall see Chancery Lane flooded by feminine practitioners in our time. This was 1918. In 1920, there was a kind of secret barrister of its day. It was called the Concerning Solicitor book by one of them. Anyway, so in this book, the writer, I don't think it's ever been revealed who he was, maybe it was a woman, explored a little bit amusing things about women in the legal profession, of course. Are we good to continue? Oh. Okay, so we're still in 1920. And it's not a funny matter by the look of it, but I'll tell you what one of them had to say about women in the legal profession. The truth is that the differences between the sexes have been grossly exaggerated by priests, journalists, and fools generally. And there can be no doubt that at least 1% of the women are as intelligent as any man. The only fly in the ointment appears to be that 3 of the 12 Canadian women at the time, obviously we didn't have women here, Canadian women lawyers have married male lawyers. And of these, 1 does not practice at all, and the others only a little. The question of marriage is, of course, the principal difficulty. One would think twice before taking a female solicitor into partnership. And it will perhaps become a great advantage for an aspiring female lawyer to be plain without being repulsive. But regardless, the Law Society understood that the question of why was no longer a relevant question. It was about the when, not about the if. And in 1920, in July, the Council instructed its secretary to assume that women were entitled to the same exemptions and concessions as men had been entitled to in the past, and to prepare itself for admitting women. Reports at the time were very funny, actually, because they talked about the fine temper with which the solicitors, as a body, are preparing to greet their female colleagues. So it was a much welcomed addition. So here we were in 1922. In May, we had the first female barrister in Ivy Williams. She, like the Canadian woman, went off and did not practice, but it was her dream that she would qualify, and so she did. In October 1922, which is 2 months before the first woman, the first woman was finally admitted, there was a Law Society meeting in Leeds. And the president at the time, a Mr. Cobson Peake, referred to the subject of women in the legal profession. He had to face it because it was around the corner. During the coming term, he said, we shall have lady solicitors. I hope they will receive from the reputed sterner sex that courtesy and encouragement which is their due. In spite of this good beginning of his speech, the president proceeded to say that he thought that in most cases, women would be far better employed in attending to housework and the bringing up of future generations of solicitors of the male sex. Regardless, the 4 women proceeded and took their examinations, and one of them ended up with stellar results. And the Law Society announced that they passed, and then, subject to articles and completing those, they would be admitted. And that's where I wanted to start painting the picture of the first 4, just to tell you a little bit of their background. So Carrie Morrison, I'm sure you will all remember the name by the end of tonight. She was the first. She was admitted on the 18th of December. She was fast-tracked. You may have heard at various points there was a legend that to decide which one was the first, the women had to compete from the very beginning in the profession, and they had to race down Chancery Lane, or maybe it was up Chancery Lane to make it hard, because a few of them were in their late 30s and early 40s. But nevertheless, that's not true. The only reason why she got to be the first is because of her war service. And she was fast-tracked because the men had been. So the rules did apply equally to women and men, and there she was, having completed her article, she was entitled to receive her roles. She had a very interesting background. She was a linguist. She was a graduate, or maybe not a graduate of Girton, because of course Cambridge didn't give them degrees until 1948. So she graduated, but without a diploma. And she announced that she was a little bit concerned that there was this assumption that women clients would just flock to women lawyers because they'd been waiting for them. She disagreed. In any case, she basically was described at her death as a poor man's lawyer and a rather eccentric character because she always kept about a dozen cats in her home. To others, she was a lovable, generous woman with a heart of gold, a great love of animals, was always ready to help either people or animals who needed aid. So that was Carrie. She was at least captured in an obituary after her death. That was not the case of Maud Crofts, who was actually literally the voice of women in law in her time. She was a contemporary of Carrie Morrison at Cambridge. Also, she did not get her diploma. And she came from a legal background, a legal family, and she married a solicitor in the summer of 1922. So she decided to go into practice with her husband. And she became one of the first writers on women's rights because she realized women didn't know their rights. They were getting more and more rights by the day. They were advancing, but they didn't know how to make use of them. So she wrote a book, Women Under English Law. And because of that, she was invited by the BBC to present, I believe it was a kind of woman's hour in 1928, and they had different kind of features, and one of them was about law. And Law and the Home, a series of talks on law and how to deal with laws in relation to husbands, wife, parents, children, and domestic outcomes and concerns. So very, very focused on women's rights. And by the time she died in 1965, nobody remembered Maud Crofts, who had also been one of the 4 BEB plaintiffs in 1913. So she had actually challenged the Law Society to admit women for a long time, but nobody remembered her. But I hope you will after tonight. Mary Elizabeth Pickup was another one. She's regional from Birmingham. She was 41 years old when she qualified, and she was already mother to 2 children. which is very unusual. She went off and studied at in a university in Wales because her father was socially mobile. He wanted his daughter to be educated, to get a better life than they'd had. And she basically articled with her husband, Thomas Pickup, and who was a Birmingham solicitor, and he put her on the training in 1919, the minute the legislation opened the profession to women so she could qualify. She joined in January 1923. She too, like the other two women I mentioned, was a campaigner. None of these women sat quietly about any issue that they were passionate about. And she was a leader of the Sir Optimist Society and often talked about equality of pay, and very, very often would, go around rallies and making sure that women understood they can change their future if they put their mind to it. And the last of the four is Mary Elaine Sykes, who is from Huddersfield. She was extraordinary because she was a political animal, really. She ended up being the first female Lord Mayor in Huddersfield and was, a general practitioner as a solicitor. And she was very interested in making sure that policy and law aligned, that women's rights were represented. So she often, for example, write to the local press and say, I challenge the other candidates in this election to tell me where they stand on equal pay for equal work. So Mary was quite feisty, and therefore she had longevity in the political landscape of her time, which is quite amazing. And she retired from the town council in 1949 after about 14 years, and she also headed up the Huddersfield Law Society. So really very, very different characters, all these women. And I really hope that you will make sure you remember the names. I don't need to repeat them, but I'm happy to. And going back to just, because we heard about the atmosphere, actually this reading room was not open to women until 1977. Women had their own wing in the building, so we cannot quite imagine how they felt because they couldn't quite step inside. But that was the case for quite a while. Women were slow to arrive. In 1932, it was the first time that women delegates took part in the Law Society annual conference. They had 2 women and 150 men. The women were Mrs. Muriel Lefroy and Mrs. Appleby, and not only did they take part, but they spoke. They had their own slots and they had their own views on legislation on their practice areas. So that was very interesting. But as some of you would know, what fascinates me is what they did when all the men retired for their sherry and smoke. I'm sure that was a room that also was not open to them. So I took you very, very quickly through this kind of run of history. I hope it was interesting for you. And I leave you with statistics. By the 1960s, there were 500 women practicing as solicitors in England and Wales. The overrunning of the profession really did not materialize. That was quite right. And there were about as many barristers in the country. The acceleration really came much later, into the late 1980s, and maybe Lubna will talk about the future and the stats and where we are today. So I'll leave you to this, a little excerpt as well, which was pretty visionary for its day, from the same kind of secret barrister of its day book, where the person who wrote the foreword, a Augustine Birrell, I've never heard of him, but never mind, he makes a very good point, because he said, should he be alive in 10 years' time, this was 1920, or if not then, at least within the next 100 years, England will have seen at least 2 famous women judges on the bench of the High Court. I say we've done better than that. We have arrived to a much better result after this very long period of time. He was right, women will rise. The pace is far too slow, and I'm sure Lubna will tell us what we can do together to change that. So here is to the next 100 years. Thank you for listening.
Gosh, I really love hearing about those rebellious women, I tell you. Totally inspiring. Thanks so much, Dana. I'm going to introduce you now to Lubna Shuja. She is our new Law Society president, As a British Asian woman, it gives me huge pride to welcome Lubna to the stage. She is the 178th President of the Law Society, but the first Asian, first Muslim, and 7th female President. And it gives me huge pleasure. So a big round of applause for Lubna, please.
Hi, thank you, and good evening, everybody, both in the room and also on our live stream today. Thank you for joining me here today at the 100 Years of Women Solicitors reception. I want to say a special thank you to our Attorney General, Victoria Prentis MP, for coming along today, and also to Dana Denis-Smith. What a fantastic storyteller she is. Two great speakers for me to follow. And thank you to both of you for speaking on such an important subject. And thank you to Amandeep Kasria, our Vice Chair of the Law Society's Women Solicitors Network Committee, for being a great host this evening. Thank you. So as you've heard, my name is Lubna Shuja. I am the President of the Law Society of England and Wales, and I am proud to be a woman solicitor. You've heard a little bit about the past. I'm going to talk a little bit about the present and the future and where we are heading. Increasing diversity within the legal profession is one of my personal ambitions, and it is one of my formal presidential priorities, as those of you who have read my presidential plan will know. And if you haven't read it, it's available on the website. Do have a look. It's good bedtime reading. Increasing diversity within the legal profession, it makes sure that women are well represented within all parts of the sector. I will be really frank with you. The way that the legal sector has operated historically has not lent itself to diversity and inclusion, and it will take a lot of effort, a lot of continued effort to push through the agenda and make sure that we see tangible change. It's a baton that I have picked up from previous Law Society presidents, and it is my job to keep that torch lit and to inject my own passion for diversity and inclusion into our ongoing work. While we are not where we need to be as yet, progress has been made, and I am confident that we can keep up this pace of change and indeed, hopefully, speed it up. All of you being here tonight, that contributes towards keeping up that momentum. So let me talk about the current issues. As it stands, the inclusion of women in the profession is a mixed picture. The Law Society's annual statistics for 2021 highlighted that women practicing certificate holders have continued to grow 3 times faster than men who have practicing certificates over the past decade. I deal with a lot of admission ceremonies, and one of the things that I'm really delighted to see is that 60% of our new admissions are now women. And nearly 53% of solicitors who hold practicing certificates in England and Wales now are also women. That's absolutely fantastic. It means that women are being encouraged, they are being supported to study law and to qualify as solicitors. And it means that being a lawyer is no longer seen as a man's job. However, while we are seeing good progress at entry level, there are still issues in relation to pay, in relation to retention, and in relation to the promotion of women lawyers. The Law Society has done an analysis of the national gender pay gap of some of the largest 50 UK law firms, and that shows that the median pay gap was 32.4%. But that figure did not include partner pay, which would have had the impact of increasing the overall gender pay gap. We've identified some signs of progress, such as select firms analysing their pay gap data in greater detail, publishing further data on partner pay, and creating action plans to address inequality. And while this is encouraging, and it shows that we are heading in the right direction, we still need to endeavour to eliminate the pay gap altogether and to achieve complete gender parity. You know, we need to ask ourselves, why are all firms not creating action plans? Why should there be any pay gap at all? There are more marked disparities when we look at promotions and senior level positions. Unconscious bias is still impairing managerial and client opinions, and the lack of understanding around issues such as motherhood and menopause is still stymieing the reach of many excellent women solicitors across the country. As a result of that, too many women are leaving our sector at associate level or at a certain age, and it's easy to understand why that's happening. Women are still facing bias in the workplace. They have to face the prospect of an unacceptable work-life balance in exchange for senior progression and the challenge of navigating a traditionally male-orientated promotion path. The unequal sharing of caring responsibilities was evident during the various lockdowns in recent years, with women being much more likely than men to take on extra childcare, to take on homeschooling, and to take on caring responsibilities. Some women solicitors had to change both their working hours and their responsibilities, and this could have longer-term implications for their career progression if they're not afforded proper support from their employers. Furthermore, progressing in the legal sector, especially in big city firms, can still be reliant on who you know, which often favours white, middle-class men who are often also privately educated. With women not sticking around in the firm and missing out on promotions, even if they do, diversity within those achieving senior positions is simply not good enough. Due to a combination of these factors, women only make up 35% of partners. There's continued to be a slow growth in women partners over the past few years, but only 0.3% in the past decade. This highlights the continued discontent women are experiencing when attempting to reach senior levels of the profession. Evidence from our roundtables on gender equality within the profession has shown that women often feel that there is no route to progress, so they leave private practice. They either move in-house or they set up their own firms so that they have more autonomy. Women shouldn't have to be put in those situations. If they want to progress in private practice, that option should be available to them. These problems can be further compounded as a result of people being multi-dimensional. So what do I mean by that? Well, women face an intersection of different discriminations on the grounds of age, disability, sexual orientation, social status, or ethnicity, creating a cumulative disadvantage. A study by an organisation called Extents came about due to the realisation that only 1% of partners at major UK law firms identified as black. Here, the pay gap is really stark. The top 10% of white British male solicitors fall within the average income band of £600,000 to £700,000. But the top 10% of black women solicitors fall within the average income band of £50,000 to £100,000. So for me, as a woman from a minority ethnic background, those figures are really, really hard to read, and I'm sure that they're really quite difficult for you to listen to today. It is key for organisations and their policies to address all areas to ensure that nobody is discriminated against because of singular or multiple barriers. So, where do we go next? We are going to keep moving forwards and doing what we can. How are we pushing the sector, firms and organisations to address these issues and make real change? Well, firstly, firms need to be changing and updating their policies, but also their workplace culture. I'll refer to flexible working as an example. We did a poll with members of our Women's Solicitors Network, and they were asked what's needed to overcome bias in the profession. Implementing hybrid working was by far the most popular response. So, an example. Firms could follow the example set by Irwin Mitchell, who have a flexible by choice scheme. And that allows colleagues to choose when and where they want to work, whether it's at home, whether it's at one of the offices, or whether it's on the go. Firms also need to change the culture of the workplace as well as introducing these policies. It's important that any flexible working scheme is not inadvertently detrimental to a woman's career or anyone's career for an example, by virtue of them being out of sight and out of mind and missing out on opportunities for progression as a result. Another example of updating policies is career breaks and parental leave. There needs to be a policy in place that allows for equal leave for both parents so that women are not the only ones that are expected to take time off. Furthermore, effective return to work support is key to retaining and progressing talented women in the workforce for the benefit of the profession. Culturally, the profession needs to embrace those who take career breaks for any reason and not see this as a lesser commitment to their careers. The firms who support and encourage these non-traditional, non-male orientated methods of working will be and are being rewarded with increased employee retention, enhanced productivity, and greater diversity at senior level. It's beneficial to everyone involved. What we have seen from our work with firms is that there is often a rush to take action on diversity and inclusion without thinking about what will have real, sustainable impact. At the Law Society, we are helping firms and organisations challenge their enthusiasm into creating something more long-term. There are a variety of schemes that we are encouraging them to subscribe to. Many of you may have read that just recently the Law Society launched its Diversity and Inclusion Framework. That framework asks firms and organisations to adopt a simple three-step approach to ensure lasting change. And details of that are on our website. We also urge organisations to sign up to our Women in Law Pledge, under which signatories commit to a range of things such as senior level accountability for progressing gender equality, setting targets for women at senior levels, and creating a culture that is inclusive and free from bias. Our Women's Solicitors Network is committed to promoting inclusion in the legal profession and reflecting the diversity of our society. And you heard a bit about that from Amandeep earlier. The network supports and advises all women solicitors and aspiring women solicitors, and is also open to allies, so we're not leaving the men out. I'd really like to encourage everybody who's present here today, this evening, to sign up to these initiatives and encourage your organisations to do so as well. We've clearly made great progress during this time, but we can always do more and we can do it better. As we celebrate the remarkable achievements of the 4 first women solicitors, and I will repeat their names, Dana, Carrie Morrison, Maud Crofts, Mary Pickup and Mary Sykes, we should all reflect on how we can contribute to this change. Collectively, we can all do more and we can all do it quicker. So thank you very much to all of you for being here this evening and for contributing to that energy. You know, we need that energy to sustain and push through the changes that we need to see. By having such distinguished guests here this evening, it shows that organisations and firms are taking diversity very, very seriously. It's not a side project, but it is a pressing issue and it needs to be a priority in their business plans. Your presence here today really does help to convince them how important diversity is. I've got a few people I want to thank. I'm going to repeat again. Thanks to my fellow speakers, our Attorney General, Dana Denis-Smith, for their words this evening and the fantastic work that they are doing every day. They are both excellent examples of what fantastic work women can do and what strong leaders they can be given half the chance. Thank you to Amandeep for being a wonderful host, and thank you to the 100 Years subgroup for all of their hard work in bringing this remarkable event today to life. And to the members of the Association of Women Solicitors who have joined us this evening. I know Amandeep spoke about your history a little earlier, but can I extend my personal thanks to the work that you and your predecessors have done. From your roots as the 1919 Club, as you were originally known, you are a symbol of the power of a collective voice of women in the profession. We owe you a great deal, and it is wonderful to have you here with us today. And finally, can I say thank you to our campaign supporter, CMS. We are really pleased that they have chosen to work with us on this important initiative. So I'm going to finish with a plea to all of you. Please do get involved with our campaign highlighting women in the profession, which is across our website and on our social media channels, and you will see that over the next 3 months. To those of you who have joined us on the live stream, thank you very much. I hope you have a great evening. And to those of you who are here in the room, can I invite you to join me this evening in some food, some drink, and some good networking opportunities. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a lovely evening.